Evil doesn't always arrive with a knife in its hand. Sometimes it brings you tea when you're tired. It tells you it loves you before bed. It holds your hand at your weakest and watches you bleed quietly. We think evil wears horns, that it shouts, rages, attacks. But real evil whispers. It shows up smiling. It says, "I'm here to help." Then it feeds off your silence, your trust, your hesitation to speak. And by the time you realize something's wrong, you're already deep in the web, confused, doubting yourself, apologizing for things you didn't do, walking on eggshells in your own home. Evil is not just violence, it's manipulation, it's emotional decay, it's the slow erosion of your identity. It's when someone rewrites your reality so carefully. You start thinking you're the problem. Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a parent, a friend, a boss, a sibling, someone close enough to know your soft spots and sharp enough to use them. Evil is calculated. It studies you. It mirrors your kindness. It mimics empathy, not because it feels anything, but because it knows it's the fastest way to control you. The Stoics warned us, be cautious not just of your enemies, but of your attachments. You see, sometimes it's not the storm you need to survive. It's the person who keeps bringing you back to the rain and calling it love. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like you couldn't breathe around someone, but you smiled anyway? Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you did something wrong, even though you didn't? Have you ever had your truth reshaped so many times that you don't even trust your own memory anymore? That's not you being sensitive. That's not you being paranoid. That's the effect of evil. Quiet, camouflaged, and close. And worst of all, it doesn't always hurt you with action. Sometimes it just watches you doubt yourself and does nothing to stop it. So be careful, because evil isn't a stranger in the shadows. It could be someone you share your secrets with, someone who says, "I love you," as a strategy, someone who drains you slowly, politely, and persistently. Smile, guilt, control, silence. These are not warning signs anymore. They are evidence. And if you're still here, listening, wondering, remembering, then you already know. There is an evil person next to you, not in theory, not in fiction, not in myth, in your real life. And the Stoics didn't leave us powerless. They left us with clarity, with questions, with reminders of what to look for and how to walk away without hate, but with wisdom. These are the 10 evident signs you've ignored. Let's bring them into the light. If you've been here before, welcome back. You already know this isn't entertainment. It's clarity. It's a mirror that doesn't lie to you, even when it hurts. You've felt the cold silence of manipulation. You've walked out of rooms feeling smaller than you went in. You've learned, maybe the hard way, that not everyone who hugs you has love in their hands. And if you're new here, I need you to hear me clearly. This isn't a channel for noise. It's for people who have been gaslit, confused, blamed, and broken, and are finally ready to call things what they are. Here, we use philosophy as a weapon, not to attack, but to defend your mind, to reclaim your peace, to remember that silence isn't weakness, it's precision. And if you've ever found yourself replaying a conversation for hours, if you've ever felt crazy trying to explain what someone did to you, if you've ever had to smile in front of someone you secretly feared, then this place, this video, was made for you. So take a breath. This won't be comfortable, but it will be honest. Subscribe. Not for me, but because you need to be reminded again and again that your instincts were right, that your discomfort was not a mistake, that evil people do exist, and they often speak softly, smile politely, and wear the face of someone you once trusted. Turn on the notifications, because you don't rise from psychological warfare overnight. It takes awareness, repetition, and reflection in silence. Watch this until the end. Every second is built to give you the language you've been missing, the patterns you couldn't name, and the permission to walk away without guilt. You're not alone. You're just finally seeing what was always there. Let's begin. What is evil really? Before we talk about signs, we need to talk about definitions, because if you don't know what evil really looks like, you'll keep forgiving it. You'll keep sleeping next to it. You'll keep explaining it away as trauma, mood swings, or a bad day. So let's begin there. What is evil? The Stoics. They didn't see evil as magic or mythology. There were no demons in the dark. There were only men ruled by vice, cruelty, dishonesty, arrogance, manipulation, control. To them, evil wasn't theatrical. It wasn't fire and brimstone. It was subtle, cold, rational, and intentional. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Why? Because becoming like them is how evil survives. It duplicates itself through reaction, through emotional chaos, through infection, through you. Evil, in Stoic terms, is anything that violates virtue. That means any behavior driven by deception, vanity, or the thirst to dominate others, that is evil. And most people don't see it because it doesn't come at them head on. It doesn't strike. It seeps. It arrives disguised as love, as concern, as family, as friendship, as "I just want what's best for you." And because it wears your trust like a costume, you let it in. You hand it your doubts. You give it access to the softest parts of you, the parts even you don't fully understand. And then it starts to rearrange the furniture in your mind. It says things like, "You're too emotional. You overthink everything. You're remembering it wrong." And you start to believe it. That's the part people forget. Evil doesn't destroy you from the outside. It gets you to question yourself, to censor yourself, to forget your own reality. That's not drama. That's psychological warfare. That's gaslighting. That's covert abuse. A kind of evil that doesn't want to hit you. It wants you to hit yourself. Epictetus said, "We are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them." But what happens when someone else starts choosing your view for you? When they feed you guilt every time you speak? When they reward your silence and punish your resistance? When they make you feel like the villain for having boundaries? That's evil, because it's not about love. It's about dominance. It's about power. It's about control without responsibility. You want a simple definition of evil? Here it is. Evil is calculated harm, hidden under the mask of care. The people who scare us openly, we know how to handle them. We leave, we block, we run. But the ones who hurt us quietly, who erode us with smiles and apologies, who use our empathy as a leash, those are the ones who stay. Because they don't need to force their way in. They're invited, trusted, believed. And that's the horror no one wants to admit. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it eats dinner with you, tucks your children in at night, sends you good morning texts. So before we move forward, don't ask, "Would someone ever do this to me?" Ask, "Who already has?" And if you're starting to feel sick, if a name just popped into your mind, don't run from it. Trust it, because your body knows what your mind is scared to say. Someone close to you is not who they appear to be, and what you do next could save your peace, could save your energy, could even save your life. Sign 1. They shift blame even when they're clearly wrong. They never apologize. They rearrange facts. Have you ever confronted someone about something they clearly did wrong, and somehow by the end of the conversation, you were the one apologizing? That's not forgetfulness. That's not miscommunication. That's a pattern, a blueprint, a sign, the first evident sign of an evil person is the shifting of blame, even when the truth is staring them in the face, and not just once, not in moments of stress or confusion, but consistently, strategically, quietly. You point out the wound, and they hand you the knife, then tell you you're overreacting. This is not a misunderstanding. This is mental alchemy, the deliberate reshaping of truth until it serves their control. A woman once told me about her partner. He forgot her birthday, didn't call, didn't message, not even a late apology. She brought it up calmly. "Hey, that really hurt me." His response? "You always find something to complain about." "I've been stressed. You never notice what I'm going through." "It's just a birthday. Are you that shallow?" By the end of that night, she was in tears. Not because he forgot her birthday, but because he made her feel guilty for caring about it. She apologized for making him feel bad, and he went to bed, victorious, blameless, untouched. That is evil. Epictetus said, "It is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting." But the Stoics also warned, do not reason with people who have no interest in truth. Evil doesn't care about reason. It cares about winning, about escaping responsibility every time, about rewriting your emotional reality. So you stop trusting your own eyes. That's what it looks like. Blame turned inside out, accountability transformed into accusation, and you left holding guilt that was never yours to carry. These people, they will lie even when the truth costs them nothing. They will rewrite history while you're still living in it. And if you challenge them, they won't defend their actions. They'll attack your tone. They'll say things like, "It's not what I said, it's how you're taking it. Why are you bringing this up now? You're always so sensitive." They minimize the event. They magnify your reaction. And then they accuse you of being dramatic, irrational, unstable. They don't just dodge accountability. They set the house on fire and hand you the matches. And you know what it feels like? Confusing, exhausting, like every conversation turns into a courtroom where you're the accused, the defense attorney, and the judge, all at once. You walk away questioning your memory. You feel the need to record conversations. You rehearse what you'll say before confronting them, not because you're unsure, but because you know they'll twist it. You feel drained after speaking up, ashamed for needing something simple, apologetic for wanting to be respected. And slowly, you begin to stop speaking up altogether. What do you do then? First, stop expecting accountability from someone who survives off deflection. Marcus Aurelius said, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Not because you should tolerate it, but because you must expect it. so it doesn't break your spirit. Start documenting patterns. Stop debating them. Stop trying to convince them of what they already know and are pretending not to. People who shift blame do so because it works, because it has worked, because every time you bend, they win. So stop bending. Let silence do what words never could. If they never apologize, then your peace is not worth negotiating. It's worth protecting. Remember, you are not too emotional. You are not overreacting. And you're not misremembering. You are being rearranged. And that is not love. It is the first evident sign that the evil you fear isn't out there. It's next to you, and it refuses to say the words, "I was wrong." Sign 2. They make you feel guilty for your emotions. The moment you cry, they say, "You're too sensitive." Here's how it usually happens. You're not shouting. You're not being irrational. You're just trying to explain how you feel. Maybe your voice trembles. Maybe your eyes fill with tears. Maybe your words slow down because you're trying not to fall apart. And instead of comfort, instead of empathy, instead of accountability, you hear, "You're overreacting. You always make it about you. God, you're so dramatic." And suddenly, your pain becomes a problem. Your sadness becomes an inconvenience. Your tears become a weapon they use against you. This is not miscommunication. This is not a partner having a bad day. This is psychological silencing. This is emotional manipulation at its quietest, most lethal form. He came home late. Again. No call. No explanation. No regard. She sat there worried, sick to her stomach, thoughts spiraling. When he walked in, she didn't yell. She just said, "I was scared. I didn't know if something happened to you." Her voice cracked, and he laughed. "You're always so emotional. You seriously cried over that?" She went quiet. And in that moment, something broke, not just in her relationship, but in her sense of reality. Because when someone makes you feel guilty for hurting, they're not just dismissing your feelings, they're teaching you to hide them. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." But let's be clear. The Stoics never said deny your emotions. They said understand them, don't be ruled by them. But what happens when someone else weaponizes your emotions against you? What happens when every tear, every vulnerable word, every human reaction is used to make you feel ashamed? That is not strength. That is not stoicism. That is emotional imprisonment. And what it looks like. You begin to censor yourself before you speak. You downplay your disappointment. You smile when you're hurt, just to avoid being called too much. You hear phrases like, "You're just being emotional." You always do this. "Can't we just talk without you crying?" Or worse, they say nothing. They roll their eyes. They walk away mid-sentence. They let your feelings hang in the air like something to be ashamed of. Over time, you become fluent in emotional self-rejection. You no longer express. You edit. You no longer feel. You filter. And do you know how it feels like? Exhausting. Heavy. Like you're apologizing just for being a person. Like every emotional reaction is a test you keep failing. Like your pain is only acceptable if it doesn't inconvenience them. You feel small, weak, embarrassed. You tell yourself, maybe I should toughen up. Maybe I am too sensitive. And that's the tragedy. You start siding with your abuser. You start becoming your own silencer. So, what to do? The first step? Validate yourself. Not with fake confidence, but with radical honesty. Yes, I'm upset. Yes, I feel this deeply. And no, that doesn't make me weak. The Stoics taught us we must train our emotions, not erase them. We must observe, not suppress. So when someone makes you feel guilty for having emotions, understand. It's not because you're too sensitive. It's because your sensitivity makes them uncomfortable, and instead of meeting you with care, they meet you with control. Remove yourself, not to punish them, but to protect the part of you they keep trying to kill. That soft, open, vulnerable part of you, that's not the problem. That's your gift. And evil people, they want you to believe it's a curse. So protect it. Speak your feelings without apology. And if they recoil, if they mock, if they minimize, then you've just seen another mask slip, one more face that does not deserve your heart. If you've ever wiped your tears before someone else could see them, if you've ever said, "It's fine," when it wasn't, not because you were okay, but because you didn't want to deal with being called too emotional again, then please hear this. You were not too much. You were just with someone who could only handle you at your quietest. And that is the second evident sign. Not that you're weak, but that you're being conditioned to bury yourself. Sign 3. They are kind, only when it benefits them. When you're useful, they're sweet. When you're not, you're gone. You know what real kindness feels like? It's quiet. It's consistent. It doesn't take attendance. It shows up, even when you're not at your best. But some people, they are kind only when you're useful, only when your presence brings them convenience, comfort, attention, validation, or power. The moment you stop being profitable to their ego, their kindness evaporates. No goodbye, no explanation, just absence. This is the third evident sign. Their warmth is not rooted in love. It's transactional. He was always charming in public, held her hand, complimented her, said things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you." But when she got sick, when she couldn't help him as much, when she needed rather than gave, he pulled away, got cold, distant, irritable. No more compliments, no more affection. And when she finally asked, "Why are you acting like this?" he said, "I've just been dealing with a lot." But the truth was simpler. She was no longer making his life easier. And so, he disappeared emotionally. This isn't just emotional neglect. It's selective kindness. Kindness used as a currency. Given when you're valuable, withheld when you're not. Seneca warned us, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. The evil person craves endlessly, attention, praise, support, power. And once you stop feeding that craving, you're discarded. That's not love, that's not connection, that's utility. You notice they're only warm when you have something they want, your time, your energy, your status, your silence. When you're meeting their needs, they're glowing, they respond quickly, they treat you like gold. But when you say no, when you're busy, when you're struggling, cold, distant, passive-aggressive, or gone altogether, their kindness isn't loyalty, it's leverage. You feel used, confused, like your worth has an expiration date. You replay interactions wondering, were they ever real? Did they care or just benefit? You start to fear being a burden, so you give more, ask less. You serve in silence, hoping to earn their affection again. But no matter what you give, it's never enough, because they were never loving you, they were using you. What do? Step back, not dramatically, quietly. Watch what they do when you have nothing to offer. Watch how they treat you when you say, "I can't help right now." Seneca also said, "He who serves only himself serves a poor master." So test the waters. Stop overgiving, stop explaining, stop bending to please. See who stays, see who disappears. The person who vanishes when you stop feeding their ego was never really with you. They were with the version of you that was most convenient, most submissive, most useful. True kindness doesn't have conditions. It doesn't come with terms. It doesn't expire. If someone's warmth disappears the moment your usefulness fades, that wasn't a connection. That was a contract signed in silence. You are not a tool. You are not a resource. You are not a utility disguised as a person. And if they can't love you without benefit, then you've just uncovered the third evident sign. Their kindness was never kindness. It was bait. Sign 4. They isolate you through fake concern. They say, "I just want to protect you from the people who care." This one doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with care. They don't push your friends away. They ask why you spend so much time with them. They don't insult your family. They say, "I just don't think they really get you." It sounds like love. It looks like protection. But over time, you start noticing something. Your world is shrinking. Your phone rings less. Your circle gets quieter. You cancel plans more often, not because you want to, but because someone made you feel guilty for making them. They're not locking you in a room. They're just dimming your life, one relationship at a time. And it's always wrapped in one sentence. "I'm only saying this because I care." There's a man I knew once, mid-level manager in a busy firm. Kind, ambitious, quiet. He got promoted, and with that came a new supervisor, a charismatic leader, the kind everyone seems to like. At first it was encouragement. "You've got potential. Don't waste your time with people who don't match it." Then came the backhanded concern. "You should be careful with James in accounting. I've seen how he talks behind people's backs. Maybe don't go to lunch with the old team too much. It doesn't look good. You can't really trust people who aren't growing like you." One by one he pulled back, skipped birthdays, stopped joking in the break room. His co-workers noticed. Some reached out. Most gave up. And within a few months, he wasn't part of the team anymore. He was dependent on one person, the very person who slowly disconnected him and made themselves the only safe option. That is not mentorship. That is not guidance. That is covert isolation, cloaked in strategic concern. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But sometimes those thoughts aren't yours. They're handed to you, shaped, planted like seeds, until you begin to question everyone around you, not because of what they did, but because of what someone else implied. When this is happening to you, it doesn't look dramatic. There are no ultimatums, just suggestions, just vibes. That friend is kind of immature, don't you think? You always seem stressed after talking to them. I'm not saying you shouldn't go. I just thought we had plans. And it feels confusing. You can't quite point to anything wrong, but you feel cornered, like every choice you make that isn't them comes with a subtle punishment, a mood shift, a passive comment, cold distance. So you stop reaching out, you stop inviting, you isolate yourself to keep the peace. But peace built on silence is still a kind of prison. And here's what it feels like. At first you feel chosen, like someone truly sees you, like they care about your time, your energy, your heart. Then slowly you feel boxed in, like your world exists only in relation to them, like your other relationships are suspicious, dangerous, disloyal. You start hiding conversations, apologizing for being seen with people, editing your social life down to one person. And that's exactly the point, because once they become your only lifeline, they control the air you breathe. So what do? First, recognize the tactic. It's not protecting you, it's isolating you, not by force, by fear, by suggestion, by eroding your trust in everyone except them. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. But the people who cut you off from others to improve you, they're not improving you, they're shrinking you. They're removing every perspective but their own. So their voice becomes your reality. Start reconnecting. Rebuild the bridges they quietly burned. Message the friend you stopped replying to. Visit the family they kept making you doubt. And most of all, ask yourself, why did I believe them so easily? Because that's where the healing starts. And if you're listening to this thinking, I used to be close with so many people. Now I only have one. And even that feels tight, like I can't breathe. Then, this is your wake-up call. They didn't protect you. They isolated you. And they used your need for love as a trap. That's not care. That's control, dressed like concern. And it is the fourth evident sign that the evil isn't loud. It's patient, it's subtle, and it wears a worried smile. Sign 5. They keep records of your flaws, but forget your kindness. You could bleed for them, but they'll bring up the time you didn't answer their text. Some people never forget. Not your loyalty, not your sacrifices, not the ways you showed up for them even when no one else did. But others, they only remember one thing: the time you messed up, the time you were late, the one message you didn't return. You could bend yourself backwards, bleed through your smile, break sleep to comfort them. And they'll still remind you of that one weekend you didn't call. That is not memory. That is accounting. And it's one of the clearest signs that you're dealing with someone who does not love you. They keep score on you. There were 2 sisters. One always showed up. Every graduation, every heartbreak, every hospital visit. She helped with rent when things got hard. She watched the kids when no one else could. She cancelled dates, skipped weekends, stayed longer than she should have. But one night, she didn't reply to a message, not because she didn't care, but because she was grieving, quietly, alone. And what did the other sister say? Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm here if you need me." She said, "Wow, I guess I finally know where I stand. You always make it about you. After everything I've done for you." It didn't matter that she had shown up 100 times before. The one time she didn't became her defining trait. That wasn't love, that was a ledger. Seneca warned, "He who forgets the good done to him is evil." Not ungrateful, evil. Because it's not just that they forget, it's that they choose to remember only the version of you that disappointed them, that failed them, that was imperfect even once. You start to notice it over time. They don't mention your effort. They highlight your absence. You plan something meaningful. They say, "You should have done that earlier." You open up to them. They bring up a mistake from last month. You apologize for something small, and they unleash a list of things they've been meaning to say. It looks like criticism, but it feels like a case being built against you. And emotionally, you begin to feel like a defendant in your own life. Every act of kindness gets erased. Every mistake gets magnified. You begin walking on eggshells, not because you're afraid of messing up, but because you know it'll be remembered longer than anything you do right. You feel like a bad person, like no matter how hard you try, they're always keeping tabs, and the scales never tip in your favor. Your worth becomes conditional. Your goodness, forgotten. So what do? First, understand, you are not obligated to keep bleeding for someone who keeps pointing at the stain. Marcus Aurelius said, "When another blames you or hates you, or people voice similar criticisms, go to their souls, penetrate inside and see what sort of people they are. you will realize there is no need to be racked with anxiety that they hold any particular opinion about you. Let them keep their record book. You don't have to play along. Start recognizing the difference between feedback and weaponized memory. Feedback helps you grow. Weaponized memory pins you down. You deserve people who remember your heart, not just your slip-ups. You deserve someone who notices the effort, not just the error. And if someone insists on tallying every flaw you've shown them, then remind yourself, the problem isn't that you failed, it's that they never forgave and maybe never truly cared. If you're exhausted by how often you have to explain yourself, if you feel like your history with someone is a courtroom, not a connection, if the only thing they hold on to is the worst version of you, then it's time to step back. Not to fight, not to beg, but to protect what they keep forgetting, your humanity. You are allowed to mess up. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be imperfect without being punished forever. The one who loves you will remember the way you showed up, not just the one time you didn't, but the one who doesn't. They'll keep a record. They'll ignore the 100 times you saved them to bring up the one time you didn't text back. That is the 5th evident sign. And once you see it, you stop trying to earn what they were never willing to see in the first place. If you've made it this far, then something in this is speaking to you. Maybe a voice you've ignored, maybe a pattern you've lived through, maybe a pain that never had words until now. So take a second and breathe. And if you're finding clarity in these words, if this feels like something you needed but didn't know how to ask for, then please like the video and subscribe, not for vanity, but because we need more spaces like this. Quiet, clear, honest. Places where we say what others won't, and where you're reminded you're not crazy, you're not alone, you're not too much. I make these for people who are waking up quietly, slowly, and I want you to be part of that. So if you're still here, thank you. Let's keep going. Sign 6. They twist your truth into confusion. It's not gaslighting, it's psychological war. You remember exactly what they said. You remember how they looked when they said it. You remember the tightness in your chest, the words, the tone, the way it made you pause mid-sentence. But days later, they deny it ever happened, or worse, they say you misunderstood, and suddenly you're not angry anymore. You're uncertain. Maybe I misheard, maybe I overreacted, maybe I just imagined the whole thing. You didn't. What you're experiencing isn't a disagreement, it's a distortion. And it's not just gaslighting, it's psychological warfare. Crafted, intentional, precise. I'll tell you a story, mine. I once loved someone who could make me feel crazy with just a look. We'd have arguments about real things, small but honest things, boundaries, words, feelings, and she'd say something sharp, something that made my stomach twist. And when I'd bring it up later calmly, she'd blink and go quiet. I never said that. That's not how it happened. You're remembering it wrong. Every time I tried to hold reality in my hands, she'd melt it between her fingers, and I began to believe her version over mine. I kept journals. I wrote down conversations. Not for healing, but to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. That is not love. That is psychological domination dressed as misunderstanding. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And when someone is slowly rewiring your thoughts, when they are twisting the truth just enough to make you question your reality, they are not confused. They are in control. This is what it looks like. You bring up something that hurt you. They say it never happened, or it didn't happen like that, or they were joking, or you're too sensitive. You try to explain your side, they interrupt, reframe, deflect. They smile while you unravel, they pretend to clarify. But what they're really doing is rewriting the story, so that by the end of it, you're the one apologizing for even bringing it up. They make it look like your memory is the problem. But it's not, it's their manipulation. And here's what it feels like you're going insane, like you can't trust your own mind. You start doubting everything. Did I exaggerate? Was I overthinking? Was it just a bad day? You begin to censor yourself before you speak, not because you're afraid of their anger, but because you don't want to feel confused again. That's the part no one talks about, the silence you enter when reality gets too slippery to hold. And eventually you stop speaking, not because you're at peace, but because it's safer not to question anything. So what do? First, write things down. When your memory is under attack, your pen becomes your shield. Second, stop explaining. The more you try to prove your truth to someone committed to denying it, the more power you hand them. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Refuse to be complicit. Refuse to hand over your clarity in exchange for their comfort. You don't need them to validate what happened. You were there. You felt it. And what you felt was real. Stop looking for confirmation from someone who benefits from your confusion. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, not because of what was said, but because you no longer trusted your own voice, then you are not broken. You are under siege. And that's the sixth evident sign. The person next to you isn't confused. They're conquering, not your body, not your words, but your mind. And if they can control that, they never have to lift a finger, because you'll silence yourself for them. Sign 7. They are obsessed with control, not connection. They monitor your moves, not your well-being. It's not love, it's not care, it's not protection. It's control, measured, monitored, masked. At first it looks like attentiveness. Where are you going? Who's that? You didn't answer my message. Why didn't you tell me you were out? But over time it doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like surveillance, like you're being watched, tracked, judged, not for who you are, but for how well you comply. There was a man I knew in my early 20s. Quiet, controlled, calculated. He met someone soft, smart, beautiful, full of light. She lit up every room without trying, and that scared him. So he started small. Text me when you get there. That dress is a bit much. I just don't trust the people you're around. Then came the location sharing, then the social media purging, then the fights every time she saw someone he didn't approve of, and eventually, she stopped going out. He never raised his voice, never hit her, never called her names, but every inch of her world became smaller, colder, quieter, until there was only one voice left in it. His. That's not connection. That's captivity. Marcus Aurelius said, "He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe." But when someone invades that harmony, when your mind becomes a battleground for someone else's insecurity, you are no longer in relationship with them. You're in a cage they built from affection and fear. Here's what it looks like. You feel guilty for not responding fast enough. You second-guess your words before you send them. You start avoiding certain people, not because you want to, but because you're tired of the interrogations afterward. Your phone is no longer yours, your schedule is no longer yours. Even your feelings begin to feel like evidence they can use. Every gesture of independence is treated as betrayal. Every boundary is called distance. Every breath you take without their permission feels dangerous. And here's what it feels like: exhaustion, emotional tightness, a constant state of tension, like you're being observed from behind glass. You stop asking yourself, is this okay with me? And start asking, will this upset them? That's when you know. You've traded your autonomy for proximity. And proximity under control isn't closeness, it's captivity. So what do? First, call it what it is. Control, not protection, not just caring, not how they show love. Love doesn't track. Love doesn't audit. Love doesn't treat your independence like a threat. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If someone else has become the master of your schedule, your decisions, your friendships, then you are no longer in love. You are in submission, and submission is not intimacy. It's fear with a pretty face. So set small fires first. Go out without explanation. Turn off location sharing. Reconnect with someone they didn't want you speaking to, not to provoke, but to see what rises, because real connection will welcome your freedom. But control will panic, control will punish, control will threaten to collapse. And if you're watching this and feel that knot in your stomach, if you've been conditioned to ask permission for your own life, then hear me. You are not selfish. You are not too independent. You are not hard to love. You've just forgotten what it feels like to be safe without surveillance. The seventh sign is not loud. It won't leave bruises. It won't scream. But it will feel like you are constantly under a microscope. And every time you act like a full human being, the lens sharpens, because they are not connected to you. They are monitoring you. And that is obsession, not love. Sign 8. They project their darkness onto you. Call them selfish, and they'll call you abusive. They lie and accuse you of hiding something. They manipulate, then call you toxic. They betray you, then say you've changed. This is projection, and it's not random. It's not just miscommunication. It's deflection, sharpened into a weapon. It's how they stay innocent in their own eyes, by making you the villain in their story. A friend of mine once told me something I'll never forget. He said, "My ex would cheat constantly, but she was so skilled at flipping things, I ended up apologizing." It started with suspicion. She'd ask him who he was texting. She'd accuse him of being distant. She'd say things like, "I can feel when you're not being honest." Meanwhile, she was the one keeping secrets, hiding messages, gaslighting him into believing he was the problem. And when he finally stood up for himself, when he said, "This isn't okay," she cried, called him emotionally abusive, told their friends he was dangerous. That's the pattern. The moment you name their behavior, they rename you as the threat. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But when someone projects their darkness onto you, they create adversity, not so they can grow, but so they never have to face their own reflection. Here's what it looks like. You try to set a boundary. They call you controlling. You express your emotions. They say you're unstable. You question something they did. They accuse you of being paranoid. And they say it with such calm, such conviction, that you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are overreacting, and slowly their narrative replaces your own. They commit the wound, but make you feel like the attacker. And here's what it feels like. You start shrinking. You stop sharing. You feel guilty for things that were never yours to carry. You begin to walk through life like a suspect, apologizing for your tone, your questions, your boundaries, your existence, and worst of all, you stop trusting yourself. Their darkness becomes your shadow, and even when they're gone, you still carry the weight of what they projected onto you. So what do? Step 1. Clarity. Know what's yours and what's not. If you said something in anger, own it. If you ignored a truth too long, face it. But don't carry the crimes that were never yours. Don't wear the labels someone else stuck on you because they couldn't face their own mirror. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is hurt. But projection is not correction. It's self-deception in disguise. It's a trick that says, "You're hurting me," when really they're hurting you and calling it love. So the next time someone flips the script, the next time your honesty is labeled aggression, the next time you express hurt and they twist it into blame, pause. Ask yourself, is this truth? Or is this punishment for speaking it? People who love you don't weaponize your vulnerability. They don't flip your heart into a crime scene. They don't make you question your goodness every time you speak your truth. The one who projects doesn't want connection. They want control over the narrative. And that narrative is simple. I'm always right. You're always wrong. If someone's darkness has become your reflection, if you're living inside a version of yourself you barely recognize, then it's time to step outside of their story. Let them carry what they threw on you. It was never yours. Because the 8th evident sign is this: they call you cruel, because they know deep down they are. Sign 9. They charm others but drain you. Everyone loves them, except the people who know them. They walk into a room and everyone lights up. The charm, the charisma, the confidence. They say all the right things, smile at the right time. They make strangers feel like stars. And yet, you sit across from them in silence, empty, small, tired. You watch them dazzle everyone else, while behind closed doors. You're the one absorbing their storms, and you start asking yourself, am I the problem? Why does everyone love them? And I just feel drained. The answer is simple. Because what they offer the world is performance, but what they give you is who they really are. I remember her. Everyone adored her. She was magnetic, the kind of person who could make you feel like the only one in the room. She laughed loud, hugged big, always had a compliment ready. People would pull me aside and say, "You're lucky to have her. She's such a light." But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see the cold stares after a disagreement, the emotional shutdowns, the calculated silence, the way she'd rewrite every fight so she always came out innocent. They didn't hear the way she mocked my insecurities behind closed doors, or how my needs were always an overreaction, or how love felt like something I had to earn back after every disagreement. I was in love with someone the world applauded. But every time the curtains closed, I became the audience to her real self. Epictetus once said, "It is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting." But what happens when someone reviles you in private and praises you in public? What happens when your truth doesn't match their reputation? You begin to doubt yourself, not because they said you're wrong, but because no one else sees it. And that's what makes it so disorienting. This is what it looks like. In public, they're the hero. Online, they post about kindness, compassion, loyalty. Around friends, they're the life of the party. But with you, they're sharp, distant, unimpressed by your needs, cold when you're vulnerable, defensive when you try to speak. You watch two versions of them exist, one the world celebrates, and one that slowly erases you. And this is what it feels like. Loneliness. Deep, soul-level loneliness. Despite being in a relationship. Exhaustion from pretending everything's fine. Shame from wondering why you're the only one who can't seem to get along with them. Confusion every time someone says, "They're amazing, you're so lucky." And over time, you stop talking about it, because every time you try, people look at you like you're the crazy one. You're not. So what do? First, stop comparing your experience to their public image. Narcissism thrives on contradiction, being loved out there while harming in here. Seneca warned, you should not just say that you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think better. In other words, don't just collect ideas, see clearly, think critically. If someone treats you like an afterthought while bathing in public praise, that's not a relationship. That's a reputation with a hostage. So set yourself free. Not all prisons have bars. Some are made of perception, the kind that says, no one will believe you. But you don't need belief to walk away. You don't need a crowd's permission to protect your peace. And if you're still wondering whether this is real, ask yourself, why do I feel safest when they're not around? The ninth evident sign is subtle, seductive, and silent. They charm the world, but they consume you. And if that charm doesn't reach the person closest to them, then it's not real, it's strategy, and it's time to stop applauding what's killing you in private. Sign 10. They fear your growth. Your peace threatens their power. They weren't afraid of losing you, they were afraid of you finding yourself, because the moment you did, you stopped needing their approval, you stopped chasing their silence, you stopped shrinking when they raised their voice. That's when they changed, not when you made mistakes, not when you said the wrong thing, but when you started getting stronger. You set a boundary. They call you selfish. You speak with calm instead of panic. They say you've become cold. You stop begging, over-explaining, apologizing for existing, and suddenly you're the villain. But this was never about love. It was about leverage. And now that they can't control you, they don't know what to do with you. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And to someone who craves control, nothing is more terrifying than your freedom. This is what it looks like. You start healing. You seek silence over conflict. You stop reacting to their provocations. And suddenly they accuse you of being different, of acting superior, of not caring anymore. But you do care. You just don't bleed to prove it anymore. You care from a distance, from a boundary, from a place they can no longer twist. And that's when their panic starts to show, because the old you was easier to manage, the version that doubted herself, the one who second-guessed, the one who'd come back no matter what. This new version, calm, clear, centered, that's not someone they can manipulate, that's someone they have to face. And here's what it feels like: strangely lonely. Because growth often means outgrowing the people who preferred you broken, but also freeing. The kind of freedom that doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet, like walking away without explaining, like choosing peace over chaos, even when chaos says you owe me. You feel stronger, not because you win arguments, but because you don't need them anymore. So what do? You let them call you cold. You let them say you've changed. You let them mourn the version of you that tolerated their harm. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And if it is no longer love, you walk away from it, not in rage, not in revenge, but in stillness." The 10th evident sign isn't loud, it's not a fight, it's not a betrayal, it's a quiet shift in the air, a moment where you realize they don't love me, they love who I was when I didn't love myself. But that version is gone, and what remains is someone they can no longer control. That's what they fear, not your anger, not your absence, but your awakening. Because a person who's at peace with themselves is no longer desperate to be understood by someone who never saw them clearly to begin with. Now let's talk about why you never saw the signs. You didn't miss the signs because you're naive. You missed them because you were hoping. Hoping it would change. Hoping love could fix it. Hoping the storm was temporary and not the weather of their soul. And maybe that's the hardest part to admit. You saw it. You felt it, but you didn't want it to be true. Here's the truth. You weren't blind. You were tired of conflict, of being the one who always brings things up, of hearing, "You're too sensitive," every time something cut deep. And so, eventually, you silenced your gut. You gave people the benefit of the doubt, even when there was no doubt left to give, because your peace mattered more than your truth. Because if you admitted what was really happening, you'd have to walk away from the illusion you were surviving in. And you weren't ready. Not yet. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But when you love someone who manipulates, the impediment often feels like love. It looks like tears. It sounds like, "I didn't mean it." It shows up as grand apologies that fix nothing, but feel like oxygen after so much choking. So you stay, you rationalize, you tell yourself everyone has flaws. It's not always bad, they've just had a hard life. And that's how it happens, one excuse at a time, until the excuses become your new reality, and the truth becomes something you only whisper to yourself in the dark. Here's what no one tells you. The first betrayal is not what they did. It's what you told yourself to make it okay. You betrayed your own clarity. You edited your own memory. You rearranged the facts to protect the very person pulling you apart. Not because you're weak, but because your heart was bigger than their intentions. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." But in toxic relationships, the opposite happens. You suffer in reality, while imagining something better is just around the corner. You hope. You hang on. You tell yourself, "If I love harder, maybe it'll finally click." But love doesn't heal what someone refuses to face. You can't outlove manipulation. You can't outgive gaslighting. You can't outweight a person who benefits from your confusion. So why didn't you see it? Because you didn't want to. Because seeing it would have required action, and at that time, you weren't ready for the storm that would follow. Because there's a special kind of grief that comes with waking up. The grief of realizing they never loved you the way you loved them. The grief of seeing years you can't get back. The grief of admitting you stayed too long. But that grief is not weakness. It's evidence you're healing. The Stoics believed self-deception was the first and worst betrayal. Not the betrayal of others, but the betrayal of yourself. When you bury your instincts, when you silence your conscience, when you know deep down that something is wrong, but choose comfort over clarity. That is the wound that takes the longest to close. But it's not too late. The truth you avoided before can still set you free now. There's a moment in every awakening when you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why did I keep allowing it?" That's when everything changes. Not because the pain disappears, but because you finally believe yourself again. And that's the price of ignoring evil. You will serve it. You'll defend it. Justify it. Build your identity around enduring it. But once you stop serving it, once you choose truth over illusion, that's the day your real life begins. Evil isn't always loud. Sometimes it sleeps next to you. Your peace is a rebellion. Your silence is armor. You are not crazy. You are being erased slowly, kindly, invisibly. It's not the scream in your face that breaks you. It's the soft voice that twists your truth. The hand that holds yours while unplugging your mind, one thought at a time. Evil isn't always violent. Sometimes it's polite, present, smiling, sleeping beside you. It makes coffee in the morning. It asks how your day was. It says, "I love you." And then it makes you doubt your own reflection. You want to believe the worst things wear masks, but often the most dangerous ones don't. They're familiar, trusted, accommodating, until you say no, warm, until you ask for space, charming, until you set a boundary. And when you finally wake up, when you start putting pieces together, you don't run, you hesitate, because it's not supposed to feel like this, because it wasn't all bad, because maybe it's you. It's not. You are not crazy. You are being erased, slowly, kindly, invisibly. The Stoics taught this long before psychology had a word for it. Withdraw into yourself, Marcus Aurelius wrote. It is within that you will find strength. And you will. But not loudly, not with fists or fire. You will not fight this war the way you think. You will win it by walking silently. Let them call you cold. Let them say you've changed. Let them spin stories to people who only know their mask. Because you're not here to be understood. You're here to be free. And freedom doesn't beg. Freedom doesn't plead. Freedom doesn't send long texts trying to explain the storm behind your silence. Freedom just walks away, slowly, quietly, and never returns. There is power in the person who disappears, who stops performing, who doesn't give the final argument. There is strength in the woman who leaves the table. Not because she's angry, but because she finally realized she doesn't need to be eaten alive to prove her loyalty. There is wisdom in the man who deletes the draft, who doesn't call, who lets go of needing closure from the one who broke him, because sometimes the greatest revenge is no reaction, no explanation, no announcement, just healing, just silence, just peace. That's what evil fears most. Not confrontation, not rage, but a mind it can no longer twist, a person it can no longer reach, a soul that now lives beyond its manipulation. That's the quiet rebellion. That's the invisible revolution. That's what happens when you finally understand you are not broken. You were just being bent out of shape by someone who feared your wholeness. So now you walk. No announcement, no revenge plan, no dramatic final scene. Just one step, and then another, toward your own stillness, toward the version of yourself you forgot existed. You won't yell, you won't beg, you won't look back, because there's a warrior inside of you. And that warrior doesn't scream. That warrior doesn't post quotes. That warrior doesn't need an audience. They just walk, in silence, in clarity, in power. And as you walk out of their storm toward your own sun, you'll find something strange happening. Your peace begins to return. Your breath feels real again. Your reflection softens. Your mind becomes your own, not because the pain is gone, but because you are gone from their world, back in your own. If this video felt like truth, you already know what you need to do. Not tomorrow, not after one more argument, not when they finally understand you. Now. You don't need permission. You don't need more evidence. You don't need to convince anyone. All you need is your silence, your clarity, your next step. And if you felt seen in this, if something in your chest stayed still through every word, then you are not alone. There are thousands, tens of thousands, quietly waking up, quietly breaking cycles, quietly walking away from what once controlled them. Subscribe, not for motivation, but for reminders of who you really are, of what you already know. Like the video if it lit something inside you, not because it entertained you, but because it reflected something you've been carrying alone for too long. And turn on the bell, so you never miss what they've been trying to make you forget. Your power, your intuition, your voice. This isn't just a video, it's a signal, and if you're hearing it, then it's time.